Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry, I really don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I normally don't do that. I believe in the more oral presentation, so I will speak whatever is there in my head. So I don't know whether I will be structured or not, but most of the time that's what I do. The main theme of my presentation is debunking the idea of Westphalian nation state. I think earlier presenter has already talked about how international, the international political structure or developmental structure or the Western theories have been creating a lot of problems, not only with regard to the governance but also with regard to the development as well. So I don't want to dwell on all those theories, but my only idea is I just wanted to make some sort of critique to the idea of Westphalian nation state. That's the one system which has been governing for a long period of time. All other systems, I think, are the byproduct of that Westphalian nation system. So the main argument here is, you see, the cognitive imperialism is sometimes more dangerous than the direct colonialism. That creates more problems. And in the morning session, Professor Sharma has highlighted about the Indian knowledge systems, and earlier two sessions were also entirely focused on the knowledge system of the Bharat. We've talked about what is there in the Ved, we've talked about the ecosystem, we've talked about the ecology, a lot of things have been discussed. Now the problem lies, that knowledge has been there for a long period of time. They were not really inventing something new. The part of the problem lies here, how do we translate that knowledge system in our day-to-day life of an individual, day-to-day life of the nation state? If we don't really do that, I don't think we will really be moving ahead. The knowledge that we talk about will just be limited in a book, and we will not really be able to practice it. In fact, we all know I don't really need to emphasize this, that every society has their own knowledge system. As Professor earlier said, in Africa they talk about the Ubuntu, you said, the well-being of I exist because society exists. That's what the idea. So in our part of the world, we talk about the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family. The Westphalian nation system somehow it divides the world into the different parts. The territorial, you lay more emphasis on the geography. Whereas the societies like Nepal and India, we've been sharing, these societies have existed before the idea of nation state came into being. We may not have been exactly in the same form as nation states do have, but we have a more profound historical background than the idea of the nation state. As a Rajya, we have existed. We can find the name Rajya being mentioned in the Rig Veda and everywhere. So the society has been there, and we have existed as a society for a long period of time before the invention of the Western knowledge system that we talk about. Then again, I think we have to be quite clear about the fact that the West and East is the imagination into the minds of people. There is nothing such exists because the world is flat. Then these are also the human creation. We've said West, some said in the East. That creates another problem. So despite the fact that these societies have existed for a long period of time, before the idea of nation state came into being, I don't see much of a problem. We can see the harmonious relationship between the countries. Basically, I'm talking about the Nepal-India relations. Like, as we became a member of a nation state, like we started defining ourselves as a member of that Westphalian nation state, then somehow the problems emerges not only at the one level but at the multiple level. The biggest problem I see is that when we talk about the civilizations, the idea of nation state not only divides the people or the territory for that reason, but it also divides our gods. If you apply that formula of a nation state, somehow Buddha becomes Nepali god and Ram becomes an Indian god. Then how do you strike a right balance there? Like this debate has been going on for a long period of time, right? In Nepal, in India, if anybody says like Buddha was born in India, then people in Nepal start agitating, right? Same thing. Then the same thing applies to the other parts as well. So the main argument here is, I think we really need to understand the nitty-gritty of our own system of governance. I'm sure there must have been the one for a long period of time. With the rise of Westphalian nation state, somehow the indigenous knowledge that we talk about, governance system, different types of governance system, different time frame. In a Vedic time, there was a different governance system. After the post-Vedic era, we can see in the different types of governance system, they have been circulating in the society in one way or the other. But somehow, with the rise of the Westphalian nation system, our indigenous knowledge of not governance has somehow, we've lost it. We don't have that knowledge system anymore with regard to the governance. Like we entirely rally behind this political system that was created in a different context, different time frame, like space and times. Like why the Westphalian nation state was created in the West in 1648 was a different context, because they have been fighting for a long period of time. They brought the idea of nation state. Perhaps this will create some sort of peace in the West, but that did not work out. That did not happen even after the 1648 when Westphalia came in. West started, the Western countries, they had different types of war. There were 100 years war, 30 years war, different types of war. They have been fighting until 1945 when they created the present political system. The Enlightenment, they so greatly talk about, somehow does not necessarily appreciate the spirituality or the civilizational values as well. Whereas societies like ours largely believe in spiritualism and civilizational heritage. They don't really appreciate that part as well. The other important part I really wanted to talk about is the Western knowledge system. Somehow, they developed through the idea of Cartesian science, that divides whole into parts, Brahman into parts, you can say. So that divides whole into parts. That does not necessarily unite societies together. Whereas the very idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that brings societies together, and it provides a lot of opportunities for different types of ideas as well. Like if you talk about the liberalism, West always talks about the liberal values. Liberalism was the biggest problem in the West for a long period of time, because they have been fighting for it. They did not really get it. If you talk about liberalism here, I think the whole idea, the whole different types of religion, different types of texts, different types of knowledge system, the idea of multiple gods, they have existed side by side, because liberalism was never a problem in this part of the world. We really did not have a problem with the liberalism. Whereas the West, it has been suffering for that for a long period of time. That's why they put a lot of emphasis on that certain facts, certain concepts, like this has to be like this. Then somehow, in the morning, there was a very important point was raised, like West was in the dark, 1,000 years of in a darkness, like as how has West become all of a sudden, how it got the enlightenment that it has got today, the development path that it has achieved over the period of time. There has been a lot of, I think, so somehow with the passage of time, we started not believing ourselves, own knowledge systems, like Angus Madison was quoted in the morning. The enlightenment, many things were quoted. So we lost our own knowledge system. Once we lose that knowledge system, then West started civilizing us in one way or the other. They came up with the civilizing missions. Then this is how your government system should run, and we've also followed that system. So somehow that system created a fundamental problems for the states like Nepal and India, which truly believes in the civilizational values and civilizational ethos for a long period of time. But with the arrival of these ideas, the Westphalian nation state, then you're more secular. I'm not really promoting, I'm not against any ideas, okay? I'm just pointing out the secular. You don't really have to believe in the religion, not necessarily dharma, which has a different meaning. They don't really go together. That's how the problem came about. Then talk about the development. think I really, the way the idea of development has been plotted for a long period of time, it has not really helped countries like Nepal, India. In India, I just wanted to point out, I'm sure you must have read it, in 1951, that was right after the formation of this current political order, 1945. They come up with the idea of the development. Like if countries wanted to develop, they have to surrender their values. 1951 UN document, you can Google it, you can find it out. Any countries, whoever wanted to develop, they have to modernize themselves. So in the course of that modernization, you need to surrender your certain values. So if you surrender values, you become modern, you become a development. Your Rusto's, the development theories, 4 stages of the development theories that Rusto talks about, largely emanates from that idea. 1951, then the 2005, almost, the 50 plus years, then they said the prescription that we provided in 1951 is fundamentally wrong, and countries are now, they can decide how they wanted to develop on their own way. So there are some fundamental problems with the theories, with the ideas that was developed in some other parts of the world. I think knowledge is always contextual. So our society, for a long period of time, we still practice certain values which has been which has been there for a long period of time. Like we do the Bhumi Puja. Right? This has been there for a long period of time. So while society is practicing certain traditional values till today, state itself has become a modern and Westphalian. So there are some sort of contradiction between the values of the state and the values of the society. So if we really don't bridge these two values, I think this will not can only create contradictions between the state, but it will also create a problem within the state that can be seen within Nepal or in India itself. There is a conflict between state and nation. Nation belongs to us, but state does not belong to us. That's the the fourth world geopolitics that talk about the identity politics. Entirely, this nation belongs to me, this language belongs, the region belongs to me, but the state as us, Bharat or Nepal, because this does not belong to me, because it's not been working for us. So somehow if we don't really contextualize the ideas, I don't think it's really going to help us with regard to the governance, with regard to the development, or anything else. Like now, particularly if you talk about the Nepal-India relations, like for a long period of time, as I said in the beginning, we really did not have much problem. Problems started cropping up in 1940-50 when we signed the Treaty of Peace and Friendship. You don't see really happening peace and friendship, at least at the people's states level. I don't see any problem at the people's level. Then what are the reasons? We've not really tried to find out. We always talk about the borders and things like that, but there are certain narratives that we need to change. If we don't really change that narratives, I don't think we're really going to have that peace that we all wanted to have. Otherwise, this Punya Bhumi or Dev Bhumi that we talk about will turn into a Ranabhumi, the strategic land, so that's how it has been happening over the period of time. And there is a connection as well. If you look at, I don't think we are a two different sovereign state, but at the same time we are a one nation, in a sense that we practice the same religion, same values, everything. So two sovereign independent political state, but culturally and civilizationally we are a one nation. Did we ever try to reflect on that fact? If we don't really see this fact, because we don't do that, because both of us are a Westphalian nation state who largely believe in the idea of secularism, where the space of civilizations and culture does not have any space in there. So unless and until we unpack these all things, I don't think we will really going to have a peace in a real sense of the term, I would say. So I just wanted to the connections, if you talk about the Nepal-India relations, they have been largely for a long period of time have been dominated, likely influenced by say 5G. I don't know, many of our foreign friends will not understand this one. 5G means 5G. First one is Ganga, Gayatri, Gotra and Gaya, 5G. We all believe in these until now. I said it until today, right? People from both sides of the border, they largely believe in these 5G. A lot of people from Nepal travel to the Kumbh Mela, which has recently been concluded. So these 5Gs they have been largely influencing the societies. Societies has been kept intact from these values. But if you look at the state, I don't think that we don't see any societal values reflected in the governance mechanisms of the state. When states make decisions, they somehow don't really keep these things into considerations, and then the problem starts coming up. So Westphalian idea of nation state somehow contradicts with the idea of a civilizational state, which Nepal and India are, right? Civilizational state, in a sense, I think today every state, they say that all of them are a civilizational state today. That trend has also increased. Europeans are claiming that we are also a civilizational state. Russia, if you like, I'm sure you must, if you have read one article that Putin has written, 5,000 word article just before the start of Russia-Ukraine war. He said Russian and Ukrainians are the same civilizations, and that's why, that he came up with the different types of propositions. China calls itself as living civilizations, with uninterrupted history, about 5,000 plus years of history. So these, there is some sort of revival of civilizational values as well. And I think we should appreciate this revival. Somehow we take these values as a problematic. I don't think the civilization is a problematic in a sense that if the India was a Sonia ki chidiya for many thousand years, for thousands of years, then how has that happened? Perhaps the knowledge must have come from the civilizational, from the scriptures only. So it's only the recent phenomenon which we have developed. So, we have reached to the point where we cannot really use our own language. I have to speak in English. Tutti-futti Angrezi mein bolna padega. Now, that's the problem, that's the civilizational problem. When we cannot express ourselves in our own knowledge, in our bhasha, then that creates a problem. Otherwise, if you have just that correct, I'm sure you must have read about Kalidasa. He writes in a Raghuvansham. The first sloka of a Raghuvansham is, I don't exactly remember it, but the relationship between these two countries I wanted to say, but I just wanted to emphasize, between Nepal and India. It's like, the Shiva is incomplete without Parvati, and Parvati is incomplete without Shiva. Same thing goes for the word and Sabda and Akshar, the voice and the letter. The voice is not complete without letter, and letter is not complete without the voice, because the voice is translated into word through symbols. Like, that's why, the Bhagarte Pratiparte, Bhagarte Pratiparte, Jagata Pitaro Bande, Parvati Parameswari. That's the first sloka of Raghuvansham. So these you cannot really separate. One becomes incomplete in the absence of other. Nepal would become complete in the absence of India, or India would become incomplete in the absence of that civilizational connection. If you, the Kali Gandaki River, how many of you have visited, or how many of you know about it? The famous temple of this in Odisha, Jagannath Puri, was built entirely from the stones. The stones were brought from Kaligandaki River, that Saligram. Same thing goes for the temples in the south, in the south, which is I just don't remember the name of that temple. It's quite famous, the entire base was built from the stones that were brought from Kaligandaki River. So Kaligandaki River, if you read in the Indian literature, not today's literature I'm talking about, nobody knows about today, because we've started, we don't really read history. They call that region as a Vishnu Desha, because the Vishnu temples were brought from the stones there. Like, same thing, the civilizational link, if we really wanted to go, Shiva lives in the Mount Himalaya, and the Vishnu lives in the Ksir Sagar, which is Samudra. Right? So if you disconnect one country from the other, our civilization is also not really going to be completed. So there are three things I think we really need to look into if we really wanted to improve the relations. Otherwise, there is a slok in Sanskrit, aham yug dharmasya vartate kasya dosadam. If we don't care about then who will care about? So ऐसा ही चलेगा तो चलेगा. Otherwise, I think the nitty-gritty, why these problems are happening as they are, there are some narratives we need to change. Of course, this is a grand narrative, changing about the idea of the Westphalian idea of nation state and replacing with some other idea is not really, is a big challenge. It's today we talk about the changing the order, we already see a lot of problems happening, around the world. But at some point of time, I think if we really wanted to maintain our sanctity as a civilization or a nation state, there is a room, there is a time that we also need to work on these things. I think otherwise, I don't think we really could, we really can't have the relations that we wanted to have. The capital formation process is not in our favor, because if you look at 40% of Nepalese, they work outside of Nepal. Most of them are in the West Asian countries, they're in the South Korea or the Western countries. So they have a different worldview then. These people will not really care about the civilizations, right? They will. So in the past, most of the people used to come to India for not only for the work, but also for the higher education. Very few people would come these days to India for the higher education side. So in the past, most of the people say, they used to meet in Banaras. Now that meeting point has become Boston or Bahrain. So things are changing, but at the same time, the duty falls upon us to relook into the relation from a different perspectives if we really wanted to improve the relation. So first thing, I think there are some theoretical or conceptual issues that were thrown out in the market, the Western literature. So I think we really need to look into this, whether they are really suitable for us or not. Knowledge is always a contextual, it's a time specific, it creates its own dynamics and its own type of imperialism. With this, I will conclude my remarks, and I will be more than happy to take the questions during the discussion period.